We're back on Loose on the Lead on this Sunday morning, the last Sunday of the Saratoga meet, on the heels of a great final Saturday that included the Woodward and another broadcast on NBC Sports that has made regular visits to Saratoga in recent years, Saratoga Saturdays, and that means Bob Neumeier has made regular trips to the spa, but you'd be coming anyway, even if there were no broadcasts. Good morning, Bob Neumeier.
Yes, especially today on the last day of my friend Tom Durkin, and of course, I've known Tom forever. You know, we've actually, in addition to the NBC stuff and the calls and the Breeders' Cup, etc., actually gone on two Italian vacations, the first of which was about 10 years ago. We had about 35, 40 people take over a couple of villas in Tuscany and had a wonderful time there, and then we made another return visit, and so, you know, Tom is, I just love the man to death. He has that unbelievable combination of talent and humanity, and he's a terrific guy, and to me, the best race caller that has been. No disrespect to Trevor or Larry Colmus or any of them, or race callers gone by. He's the best, and they're going to go very far to me to top Tom Durkin. So I love the man, and I'm here to wish him a great retirement. I know he will find many things because he's so well versed in so many things: opera, art, literature, whatever. So he'll be great. He'll be great. Love the guy.
And you bring up the elements of Durkin's personality that were so easily expressed in the calls, and they manifested themselves with his erudition, and that is something that no matter how good you are technically in terms of broadcast or in terms of what the job entails calling races, having that personality and allowing it to come through in the calls made him unique, and that's going to be the echo that Durkin's voice stays forever.
Well, it just doesn't happen overnight. I mean, I can tell you just firsthand that just in terms of preparing for the Triple Crown and the Breeders' Cup, he used to, as soon as 3-year-olds would, look like they were eligible or would become possibilities, he would keep a folder of all the 3-year-olds. He'd have memories of their races and their silks, whatever. And then for Breeders' Cup time, I remember, we would typically get there on a Wednesday for a Saturday race, and he would be locked in his hotel room, literally, going over the folders, going over replays, and we'd say, Tom, a bunch of us are going to dinner tonight, and he'd say no. He'd say, I'm not going out until so he would literally, Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays, just hold up in his hotel room, poring over charts and folders, watching replays. A bunch of us are going out and having a good time and having dinner and having a beer or two, and Tom, nope. Now after the races, that was another thing.
Story.
Because he had 100 of his friends from Chicago that were there, and he put on the darndest good Breeders' Cup parties there was. But I cannot say enough for him. I know that the NBC sports community, you will miss him greatly, as will racing, and I think that he has been given the tribute that he deserves over the last month. And so I have this hat in his, because it is Durkin's last call today, the spin away, and so I will treasure this hat for sure.
Well, and we all have treasured Tom's presence and just domination of the craft, and it'll never be the same. There'll be people that'll call, they'll be great, but this was a seminal voice. This
is a kind man. This is a human guy. This is a guy, he can't say no to anybody. He's so charitable, he's just a giving man. And people people know him from the racetrack, but they don't know how learned he is. They don't know how much he follows life and books and literature and art. And his this isn't just about the racetrack to Tom Durkin. He's just a well-rounded person. And again, I've known him, 25, 30 years, and we've had our ups and downs, and together, and it's just I can't say enough about him. I really cannot say enough about him, and I know that the racing end is really going to miss him. And when you think about it, what's interesting is what a unique talent race calling is.
For starters.
Yeah. So Tom, decides he's going to retire, and now you think about the candidates that could replace him. And there are, I would say, probably, 8 to 10 very fine race callers across the country. But you take a given job, whatever they might be, a manager in sports or someone who runs a company or whatever, and you can usually get a headhunter to get, 100 great candidates. How many really great, when you think about there's millions of people in the country, how many great race callers are there in wait to call races in Arlington or Lone Star or anyway? It's a very small sample, which is very unusual. And I know Larry Collmus will do a great job here in New York. He's very accurate. He's done a great job with us in the last few years in the Triple Crown. And he'll be great, but it's just such a small, just an unusual kind of craft.
On that topic, you called hockey. You called NHL hockey.
Yes.
And growing up in Hartford, we've had fun conversations about me, being a Whaler season ticket holder, and your voice on the transistor under the pillow when you were out in Winnipeg and Edmonton. Is it something that you ever tried? Did you ever try to call a race?
I couldn't call a one-horse race. I could not call a one-horse race. No interest.
It's always funny when they do media day down at Laurel. For about
They've
the first 100 yards, they think like they have it.
I have too much respect for the racing community to have them hear one of my bozo calls. Unless maybe they've got a two-horse entry, I might give it a shot then. Otherwise, no. But I think in Tom's case, he says, as we get older, I know that my recall is not what it used to be. And I have a little bit of a problem with attention span and whatever. I used to be able to sit down and handicap a card for 4 or 5 hours. And I find out now that after an hour and a half, I got to take a break, I got to come back to it. And I know Tom's probably feeling the same thing, that he has to work harder now. And one thing he did not want to do was leave the game without being on top. And it was so interesting that I just happened to, I was watching TV late last night, and they just happened to have an interview Charlie Rose Hadman with Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David about why did they leave the Seinfeld show. And it was so interesting to me because it's a comparison with Durkin, and both Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld said, we did not want to leave the show, we didn't want to go an extra year and make it stale. We wanted to leave when we felt it was right. We didn't want to feel, we were feeling like we were kind of maybe running out of ideas and it was harder for us to get material. And they said, we would just want to leave on top. And I think there's a parallel there with Seinfeld and Durkin as well.
Didn't want to jump the shark.
Yeah, I know you didn't come in town only for Tom. That's the main reason. But obviously you're a player and you've been here because I saw you down at the Parting Glass doing Andy Serling's show on Thursday
That was
night.
fun.
I must say, you are live in front of a live audience. You enjoyed the audience out there.
I didn't really know what to expect. He invited me, and I kind of walk in, and I thought suddenly there's like 200 people in the audience,
absolutely.
and here's Jerry Bailey and Bill Mott up there telling stories, and a lot of them are horse players. So I thought it would be fun if we told a couple of horse player stories.
You had some great horse players.
And days of the fairs in Massachusetts,
Absolutely.
and that's where I kind of, my dad was my late great father, Edward Neumeier, who was. I spent many a year here at Saratoga under the tree with a bunch of friends, with the cooler and the beer and watching races. And so those are my memories of Saratoga is with my dad. And of course, he was, as I told the story at the Parting Glass, he was a weekend seller at Suffolk Downs. And he loved the fairs, and we would go, there was a Weymouth Fair. I grew up in the town of Weymouth, Massachusetts. And the million stories about the fairs and the days that I told the one story about the fairs when we used to have 4 or 5 guys at 5 furlong races scream out who was on the lead because sometimes they didn't lock the machines. So they would yell, the first guy would yell the number to the second guy, to the third guy, to the fourth guy, to the fifth guy who was standing by the $10 show windows. And they'd go, 5! And they'd go, 5, 5, 5, 5. So we'd press 5, 5, 5, get as many tickets out as we could. Sometimes we got $20, sometimes we got six tickets, sometimes we got 8 tickets, and we were really lucky we got 10 tickets. And those suckers hit 80% of the time, those $10 show tickets. And if you were on the lead in the 5 furlong fair, you hit 1, 2, 3, 85% of the time. So that's how we made money.
That's provided that the jock didn't mysteriously fall off late in the stretch.
Right, correct. Or something happened. But that's just one of a million of them.
Well, I also, the entire audience appreciated, you're talking about your father and being a weekend player, came home and it was always, broke even.
Yeah, so he'd tell my mother, you made a few bucks. If he won 200, he'd say he made a few bucks. if he lost, he'd say, I broke even. My mother said, yeah, sure.
Everybody in the audience appreciate that because we've all been there.
Right, exactly. No, it was fun. It was a good time, and I know that a lot of people that were in the parting glass are horse players, obviously, and so I think everybody has stories, and that's the fun of the game. Is most of the stories that we tell, are usually heartbreakers. The ones that we get photoed out, we got DQ'd, we got this, we got that, and it's a million of them, and that's what makes the game great.
We only got about a minute left, but let's get some thoughts on yesterday's Woodward. It's my lucky day in Marino, and then go back to last week with the Jimmy Jerkins exacta in the Travers.
Yeah, let's start with the Travers, and this is why, to me, playing horse is a very difficult game. As I analyzed the Travers, it was clear that Byron was going to be on the lead. And I had spoken to Christophe Clement, who of course had Tonalist, and of course I knew, speaking to the owners of Wicked Strong, that they were just going to let the race unfold as it would. And they were not interested in putting undue pressure on Byron. Christopher Clement said the exact same thing to me. He said that I'm not going to take Tonalist out of the race by pressuring Byron early. And I said, are you going to tell Rosario to sit back? And he says, I don't give Rosario instructions. He says, when I give Rosario instructions, he screws it up anyway. So he says, I'm not telling him anything.
Exactly.
So what happens? I picked Byron because I think he's going to be on the lead, and nobody's going to pressure him because I know that Wicked Strong and Tonalist are going to sit back. Maybe they'll be in the mix. Here comes Rosario flying out of the gate. So he takes Byron out of the race, and he takes himself out of the race. So here's a case if you're a handicapper, and I like Rosario. He's a darn good jockey. But he destroyed Tonalist. He destroyed Byron. He set it up for, hey, VE Day. He plodded along. He picked up the pieces. Wicked Strong, to me, ran a hell of a race. He just got beat in the last jump. But if you're a handicapper, these are things you don't know. These are unexpected things. You try to visualize. But then something like that can happen when Rosario just goes after that horse into the first turn. I knew it was over into the first turn for Byron. I knew it was over for Tonalist. End of story. So that's that. That's what makes this game tough for handicappers. Now, as far as yesterday was concerned, it looked like a very speed-oriented track, didn't it? Yesterday,
Yeah,
here
no,
in
it was
Sarasota?
fast. It was slow.
So the question was who was going to put the heat on, because it was almost an analogous situation. Moreno, Byron, who was going to put the heat on him? Police, I know they put the blinkers on It's My Lucky Day. So you figured he would pressure Moreno. And Zivo, I kind of liked a little bit. I didn't think, I didn't know if Zivo was in the class of those kind of horses. I took a shot at the entry because I thought that Godolphin might sit a nice trip, and he did. He sat there.
Either one.
Right. He didn't have any punches. I thought it was pretty good value.
Yeah,
I thought either horse had a shot.
And they
I think they went out 7 or 8 to 1.
were awful.
And Long River was in position, and he didn't fire late, and the 2-1 on. It turned out to be a hell of a race. I'm very happy for Eddie Plisa. Grade 1 for that horse. It's been a darn good horse. It's My Lucky Day. And no disgrace to Moreno as well. He ran good. I mean, this was a terrific eyeball-to-eyeball duel down the stretch with It's My Lucky Day and Moreno, and Paco Lopez turned out to be the winner. Nothing closed. I'd like to go back on the charts yesterday to see if anything came off the pace yesterday. I didn't see much at all. Very rare. I'm not into track bias like a lot of these handicappers, but clearly you'd have to mark down that if you're a closer, it was tough. Now, let's work forward, because I do know that Zivo, that Chad Brown asked the owner if he'd like to put a rabbit in the race yesterday, because he knew Moreno was going to be on the lead. And the owner, Tom Coleman, said it's unsportsmanlike to put a rabbit in the race. Now, we can argue and debate whether that is or isn't. I think it's fine. It happens in Europe all the time.
All the time.
Didn't Frankel have a rabbit in a lot of his races? Sure. Right? So the owner said no. He said, let's just hope that, and it wound up being a moot point, actually, because so the owner, I'm leaving the track after the race, and I just happened to run into Tom Coleman, and he said, we're putting a rabbit in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. So put that in the back of your minds, folks, for the Jockey Club Gold Cup, that if the owner has his way, and they usually do, he'll claim something, and he'll put a rabbit in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, because I know Chad Brown believes Zivo loves Belmont, so file that away for future reference.
All right, Bob Neumeier from NBC. We appreciate your visit, and good luck on
It's always a pleasure, guys. You're doing a great job.
Here.
Keep that game rolling. Kelly Breen's waiting to get on. Talking about that Prioris win when Paco Lopez went 33 in some gate work. He said he loved them yesterday.